So I don't know if the reason is because the halacha is that Shmita only cancels loans when they're yovel. It works a little differently than Shmita of the land. So the loans is derabana, but that seems to be something that was kept. Now it could be that now there's halacha by hafrashas chala, even though there's no need to separate chal and chutz la'aretz, there's halacha that we separated in order that we remember that when we'll go back to Yisrael and we'll be chayav in the mitzvah of chutz la'aretz that there are halachas that we have to do. So that's brought down by hafrashas chala. So it maybe, I'm just a complete hypothesis. I have no way of, maybe because there was, not big communications between Eretz Yisrael and anywhere else for a long time. And we know in the very small communities or tiny communities of Jews in Eretz Yisrael at all, there was no talk about Shmita of the land till maybe, 150 years ago. But people did write Pruzbuls in order to remember there was something about Shmita. So maybe they said, Shmita is coming. I mean, the pasuk itself there does say, Karva shnas hasheva shnas hashmita. But again, that's said in the context of canceling loans. So maybe because for most people, we only thought about Shmita for canceling loan, maybe that's what we call Shmita. Even though this Masech is called Shviis, which is from the word seventh year, sabbatical. So whatever it is, we call it Shmita, but Shmita is only mentioned in the Torah in regard to loans. So Shviis cancels loans, whether it was written in a document or not with the document. So store credit doesn't cancel. But once it became a loan, then Shmita would cancel it. Meaning you had a tab at the grocery store, and when you have some money, you pay him some money. Then Shmita doesn't cancel it because it's not a loan. But once it became a loan, you have to pay it by a certain date. Then it becomes a loan, and Shmita applies to it. Yeah, Mike, did you see the email I just sent? Okay, I just sent an email from the show. It should have been announcements from a few weeks ago, but there's a link on there that you could click. Okay, so underneath there, it should say something about my share, right? On that email? Did an email just come in the last couple minutes? No? But so check again. Because I did send it, okay? Okay, so just check it again. It's coming, okay? Right.
Hi, this is Erwin. Do you
Hi,
hear me?
Erwin.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Listen, the last two meetings, I've had to look for the link. I've gone back. Fortunately, I've kept the announcements. So basically, I had to go all the way back to the end of February to find a live link.
Right, that's what I did. I forgot. When I didn't have share for weeks, I took the link out. I have to put the link back in the announcements. So from the email, you could just click on that. You're right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Harishon Rishon Neshame. So Rabbi Yehuda says he disagrees about your store credit, and he says that each time you buy something on credit, only the newest purchase is credit, and the previous purchases that you made become like a loan. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, each new purchase on store credit makes the previous purchases into a loan, which is different than what the Tanna Kama says. Schar sacher ein mishamin. Wages that you pay a worker does not get canceled. You owe him the workers. It's a wage. It's not a loan. In regard to other halachos, sometimes you have to pay him every day. Whatever the reason is why you didn't pay him every day, we're probably talking about a case where for whatever reason you were allowed to not pay him that day. But when you owe someone a wage, that's not a loan. But if it was changed into a loan, then Shmita could cancel it. Rabbi Yosemer, Kamalacha Shaposekes Shviis Mishametes. Any work that ends on Shmita, Shmita cancels it. V'she'ena Posekes Shviis Ena Mishametes. But if it doesn't end on Shmita, then Shmita doesn't cancel it. So let's say, Rabbi Yossi says, according to the Bartanura, this is talking about if you were hiring someone to do something that you're not allowed to do on Shmita.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a loan automatically. But if it's not a forbidden thing, then Shmita doesn't cancel it. Meaning, even though it was a wage, but because it was something for something that you're not allowed to do on Shmita, there's a special law that it becomes considered like a loan, so that Shmita would cancel it at the end of Shmita. But we don't pass with Rabbi Yossi. Now, in regard to the loans getting canceled. If there's a couple laws involved. One is that if you would let someone and he says, I want to pay you back, you have to say, no, Shmita cancels it. I'm not going to take it back. We'll see the Mishna later, but that's one halacha. And the second halacha is you can't go and say, I lent you, you owe me. So you can't actively collect it. And if the person comes to pay it back, you have to say Shmita cancels it. So it's right.
That's right.
Base. You shechted an animal and you split it on Rosh Hashanah, meaning in the first day of Rosh Hashanah of the 8th year. So the Bartanura here. The Bartanura says you shechted it in the 7th year and then you split it up in the 8th. But the Tiferes Yisrael makes it sound like you did it on the first day of Rosh Hashanah.
If it was a 2-day.
So if it ends up, now this is something that doesn't happen, at least not in our calendar, but it theoretically could happen. What if it ends up that El will always have 29 days, but what if it happened that El would have 30 days? So it ended up that the day that you thought was Rosh Hashanah ended up still being Tishrei, Mishameh. So the month went one longer day than you expected, because you expected Rosh Hashanah to be on the 30th day of Elul, that it was already Tishrei. It ended up that day was still Elul, and the 31st day of Elul was Rosh Hashanah. That will cancel, meaning I guess people, cows are a big expense, whatever. So so when you were splitting it up, so you were different people were buying it from you, but on a credit, so it was like a loan. So that ended up becoming like a loan, and the end of Shmita cancels it. So also this is halacha. We see that the end of Shmita cancels a loan. There is an opinion of the Rosh and Gittin that the beginning of Shmita cancels a loan, but we don't pass it that way. It's the end of Shmita. The Ima Ve'eno Mishameh. But if Eor was, if Elul was regular, only 29 days, so if it was on the 30th, then it didn't this loan of selling the parts of the cow that did not become a loan that got canceled. If people did certain averos and Beis Din issued a fine to the person that they had to pay. So the case of Ones Mafatim Motzi Shemra, Ones was someone raped a young woman. A Mafata is he seduced her. So there's a different halacha if it's in the city or not in the city. And Motzi Shemra, so he got married and then he claimed that she wasn't a virgin, and then end up in that case it ended up that he made it up. So among the punishments that they get is they have to pay a fine to her or to her father. And so that is not for, so meaning if someone usually, does something wrong to someone else and you have to pay them back, in general, that's a restitution. This is not, these payments here are not for restitution. These are as a fine. So, b'chol ma'aseh beis din, anything which is a ma'aseh beis din, ain't a mishmita. These don't get canceled. So even though this guy owes money and hasn't paid it yet, but it's considered a ma'aseh beis din, and Shmita doesn't cancel it if it hadn't get paid by the end of Shmita. Hamaval amashgon, the Moser Shros of the Beis Din. If you lent on a collateral or you gave your documents to Beis Din, Eino Mishamtin, they do not cancel. They, meaning, if you had a loan but you had collateral on it, you took something, or the guy gave you, you're not exactly mutter to take, but you were given collateral by the person. So then the loan isn't canceled by Shmita. It probably is because it's considered as if the loan had already been repaid. I mean, they make a drasha that when your brother owes you, meaning your fellow Jew, then Shmita cancels it. But if you already have something of his, then it doesn't get canceled. And Moser Shros of the Beis Din. So it seems to be that Moser Shros of the Beis Din, some might hold that it's similar to what we said before, that if Beis Din has it, Beis Din has the power, so they're able to collect. Or some seem to explain that that Shmita cancels individuals' loans, but if you gave it over to Beis Din, it's not an individual's loan, and it doesn't count. Now, in regard to corporations in halacha is a separate shaila. According to many opinions, it doesn't seem to be an idea of a corporation in halacha. Though about 10 years ago there was a problem because a Jewish-owned hedge fund or whatever bought the parent company of Jewel on Pesach. I think the closing went through on Pesach, and Rabbi Schwartz had to paskin if it was considered that the Jew bought all the chametz on Pesach, and then all the chametz owned that Jewel stores had would be chametz shavel of a Pesach. And I think and so one of the main sources that we have is actually a tshuva from Rabbi Regensburg, who was the first of Basin of the CRC, and I think he died in the late 70s. I think after he retired from Chicago, he moved to Israel, and so he has a tshuva about corporations and halacha. Right now, I don't remember what he says. I have seen it, and I think I have a copy of the Sefer at home. If not, it's on HebrewBooks.org, so you can look it up. But I don't know. But as I recall, Rabbi Schwartz, I think, mentioned that the sale took place on the closing took place on Pesach. So, in American law and other, a corporation is not an individual, but under most situations, halacha doesn't recognize that. So Rabbi Regensburg talks about when the corporation isn't considered a person, though in most cases it would be. So it's not like you can make a corporation and then Shmita doesn't apply, but only when you give it to Beis Din. The famous Mishna Gimel, Pruzbul, Eino Mishameh. If you have a Pruzbul, it doesn't cancel a loan. This is one of the things that the elder Hillel decreed. He saw that people were holding back from lending people in need before Shmita. But over in Amal Shakasa Torah, and they were transgressing the halacha of the Torah. Be careful lest there'll be an evil thought in your heart and saying the 7th year Shmita is coming close, and you're going to see your brother and you're not going to lend it because the attitude is, well, since Shmita is going to cancel the loan, I'm not going to collect it. I'm not even going to lend him. So Hillel says, no, that's not okay. So Pruzbul wasn't enacted in order to help the lenders get their money back. It was so that they would lend money to the people who need it. Hiskin Hillel Pruzbul. So Hillel decreed a Pruzbul. So there's a strange Rashi or semi-strange Rashi in Makos that when Rashi says that Moser Shros of Beis Din is Pruzbul. And Tosfos says, no, it can't be. They're listed separately in separate Mishnayos. They're different things. So one way to understand Rashi is that Hillel extended. There was a principle of Moser Shros of Beis Din. You give your documents to Beis Din, and Hillel extended it and said, even if you don't actually have your loan documents or loans which don't have documents, so you can declare in front of Beis Din about these loans, and then it's as if you gave it to Beis Din. So one way is not saying that Pruzbul is the same thing, but it works along the same principle. And so Hillel extended, even when you can't actually give a loan document, you can write this document to the basin. So Pruzbul can be oral and it could be written, but we only use written Pruzbul. And we'll talk about a few halachas afterwards, after we're finished with Mishna here about Pruzbul. But there's machlokas between the Mechaber and Rama. According to the Mechaber, you need to have a real basin of experts be the basin to whom you give over your loans. And the Rama says, no, any three people could be a basin for Pruzbul. And that's the practice that we usually have. And also, but we also write it, even though it might work orally, we don't do an oral Pruzbul. Daled, zel gufo shel Pruzbul. This is the main part of the Pruzbul. Moser ani lachem, ish ploni ploni hadayam shebamakom ploni. I give over to you, gentlemen, so and so and so and so, the judges in a certain place, in this certain place. Now, really, you need 3 dayanim. And so here we would say here in Skokie, because we're in Skokie right now. If you'd be in Chicago, you would say Chicago. Now, it happens to be, Rabbi, the CRC wanted to once move, they wanted to move to Lincolnwood. And Rabbi Schwartz didn't let, because he said, Gittin has never been written in Lincolnwood. We would have to establish how to spell Lincolnwood on the get, and I don't want to get involved with that. We write it in Chicago, we'll stay in Chicago. Now in Cleveland, most Jews don't live in Cleveland itself. They live in University Heights or whatever it's called, or different things around there. But because it's all part of one metropolitan area, in Cleveland, in the Gittin, they just write Cleveland, even if it wasn't actually within the city limits of Cleveland. And that's what they've accepted there, and they've done it for a long time, which it is the Cleveland metropolitan area. So I mean, there is a logic to it, just like we're in the Chicago metropolitan area. But it's probably we were talking about this on, I think it was on Shabbos, that about Bnei Brak. Ellie said, it's not like there's a place Bnei Brak. It's completely continuous from Ramat Gan, which is completely contiguous from. But I don't understand. So the mayor of Miami Beach doesn't. Right, you cross the street and it's county government. Right, but just like here, how is Skokie distinguished from Lincolnwood, distinguished from Chicago? Nothing. They just draw a border and they say here's Chicago, here's Skokie, here's Lincolnwood, and Bnei Brak also. But in other places, you're in one city, and then you're not in the city anymore. You're somewhere else. So like in neighborhoods in Yerushalayim, you cross an intersection. Now you're in a new neighborhood, and the street has a new name. But that's all Yerushalayim. So I tell you, so and so, the judges in this place, any obligation that I have, meaning a loan that I'm in control of, I can collect it anytime I want. And the judges sign underneath it, or the witnesses. And our practice is to have the dayanim. Hey, Pruzbul hamukdam kasher, ucher pasol. A predated Pruzbul is kosher, but a post-dated one is pasol. So what does this mean? So this means that basically, let's say someone made a Pruzbul a week before Rosh Hashanah, the end of Shmitta, and then they made a loan 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, but they dated it Erev Rosh Hashanah. So if it was post-dated, it's kosel, because really the Pruzbul only went to any debt that a person had up until that time. So if we would allow a post-dated Pruzbul, people who took out a loan after that time, really there is no Pruzbul on their loan, and it would be uncollectible. But because of the date on the document, it looks like it is collectible. So because that would unfairly take away the rights of some lenders, it's possible. So the Mishna says, in general, in general, documents of loans which are predated are motor, but post-dated, if they're predated, they're puzzle, and if they're post-dated, they're kosher. So why is this? So, wait, Chitrin. So the general case is, let's say that they bought it Pesach time and they bought a field, whatever, and they wrote on the document that it happened in Tishrei, right after Sukkot. So that's puzzle because let's say that this field was collateral, whether it's for a ksuva or for certain other debt that would take precedence. So the people who had rights on that land for that time in between, for the end of Tishrei and Cheshvan and Kislev and all those months until Pesach, they're not going to have rights of collection from the original owner because it looks like it's not his anymore, but it was still his. And because they have rights against him, because he owes them money, if you predate this, let's say this star to sell the field, they're going to get ripped off from debts that he legitimately owes them. So that's why the predated, in general, like a document like that is a predated is puzzle. But if it's post-dated, it's kosher because you're not gonna. None of the people who have liens against that seller are going to lose their money from the fact that it's post-dated. So if one, I have something I don't understand about here. Pruzbul chol echad ve'echad. So it seems if one person lent from 5 different people, each of those lenders needs to write their own Pruzbul. So it doesn't go after that the Beis Din will collect any debt owed by Shimon, but it's any debt any loan that was made by Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Yosef and Binyamin. So it goes by the lender. So each person who lent needs to make their own Pruzbul. Chamisha Lovin Me'achad Eno Kosev Ella Pruzbul Echalakul. 5 people borrowed from one person. That one borrower, the one lender who made the loan, so all the people, he just needs one Pruzbul. And that is executable for all of the different loans that he made. So this part of the Mishna is just saying it follows the lender. So if one lender made many loans, he just needs one Pruzbul. And if let's say there's one guy in town who borrowed from everyone in town, so even though there's only one person to collect from, it doesn't work that way. You can't say any loan owed by Ruvain can be collected. No, each one of the lenders needs to make their own Pruzbul. Zayin Vav in kosim Pruzbul ala karka. You can only write a Pruzbul if people have real estate. So this is a halacha that I was not aware about, and so people who don't own real estate, you can't write a Pruzbul. Whether I guess if they're the lender, no, the borrower needs to have karka because the Bartanura says it seems that part of the mechanism, at least according to the Bartanura, is that the Beis Din is making a partial collection before Shmitta. So they could collect if he has karka, if he has real estate. So the problem is a lot of people who borrow money don't own real estate. They rent a house, this and that. So there is a workaround that I think that even the Shulchan Aruch mentions it, or the Rama mentions it. They could have a flower pot that has a hole in it and put it on land. So a flower pot with a hole in it is considered karka. It's considered land, even though you could lift it up and you can't lift up land. So if someone who lets them put a flower pot with a hole on their property, then that flower pot is considered their land. Im ein lo, if the person doesn't have real estate, so then someone, usually the borrower, the lender should give him a little piece of property in order that he could collect. So meaning that this principle works according to Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. You can do something beneficial to someone even if he's not aware of it. So the fact that making him a landowner, that's a schus to him. Some point out that it ends up though that it's bad for him because if he doesn't have the land, then he's never going to have to pay this loan back. So, how much of a schus is it that he's giving him this gift of a little bit of 1 square foot in his backyard? But again, that's the zechia, I guess, but that's something that's later on. But what's actually happening? The only thing happening is he's giving him a little gift of a little piece of real estate. So even though that means later on he's going to pay, that's not considered the immediate detriment to him. The consequence of him receiving this land is that the Pruzbul is going to work, but overall it is a schos that he's being given this little piece of land. If he had mortgage property in the city, so in this case, mortgage doesn't mean like us, because in our cases, we have a mortgage on our house, but we paid off part of the mortgage already. So, and we're in control of it, even if we don't necessarily own the whole thing. But in this case, it seems Mamushkan means that it's really not in his control right now. Someone else is in control of it. So, since he's not in control, is that considered land for Pruzbul? So the Mishna says yes. Postal Pruzbul. Rabbi Chutzbis Omer. So I don't know if this is Rabbi Chutzbis, the famous Rabbi Chutzbis, the Metorgamon, who was one of the Harugei Malchus. Kosin leish al nichse ishto, v'leisomim al nichse apotropin. So let's say a woman borrowed, a man borrowed, but he doesn't have any money, but his wife brought into the marriage certain properties. You're allowed to write a Pruzbul that he's going to pay back, even though he doesn't own land, but his wife has the land. Or for orphans who have no control over their property because they're minors, through the property of the apotropos. The apotropos is the custodian, the court appointed guardian of the estate. So in general, there's very little the apotropos can do, because the Gemara is very careful that the orphans whose father died, and there shouldn't be any decision made that could harm them. So the apotropos is really able to do very little, because he's not going to do anything to sell land or stuff that might, maybe when they get older, really they would have wanted to keep it. And in cases where the father owed money, in certain cases he's allowed to pay loans back, and in certain places he's not allowed to, because they have to bring good proof that the loan was never repaid. It's extra safeguards for the estate of these young orphans. So the Yisomim are too young to actually own the land. So it's almost like, to use legal terminology, because they're too young to actually own it, because they're still minors, the apotropos is like a trustee, and the trust owns it, or the estate has a trust, or the estate is a trust that owns the land right now. So technically these orphans don't own any karka, don't own any real estate, but their father maybe had made loans that they want to be repaid. So if the custodian, the apotropos, owns real estate, so that he could write it on their behalf on real estate that he has, even though they're too young to actually own real estate. Does that make sense? Using these words, it sounds a little complicated. It's real simple. They're minors, so they can't own anything, but their father owned it, so they're going to inherit it from him once they're old enough. So the apotropos, who's the custodian or the trustee of the father's estate, which they cannot yet take possession of because they're too young, he writes a Pruzbul so that he can collect loans that the dead father made through his own land.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So let's say he's 3 years old. It's going to take 10 years until it becomes bar mitzvah and he could acquire the land. So you might have to write two Pruzbuls, one this Shmitta and one the next Shmitta. But the point is that that even though they technically don't owe, that's the opposite case of what the previous Mishna was. Though. The previous Mishna, we said that the borrower needs to write a Pruzbul. So now this would be bad if we're making a Pruzbul that the father's estate owed money. Okay, what's going on here? Oh. So this is a case where the apotropos had to borrow on behalf of the orphans.
Yeah.
This is where the apotropos had to borrow on behalf of the orphans, and the orphans don't have land, and it doesn't, and they're too young that you say, oh, this land is owned by them. So the apotropos uses his own land and rights on the behalf. So again, this makes sense that. No, there's a case where he. So I don't know if this is a case where he's borrowing against the inheritance. They needed money, so he took a loan on their behalf. But again, the idea of Pruzbul is if people aren't going to pay back, people aren't going to lend them. So whether this is part of the kind of Hillel, probably not, but this is in order that, they could get, so he could take a loan out for them. Zayin, Kavers Dvorim, a honeycomb, so a bee's hive. So if it's stuck in the ground, everyone agrees that it's in the ground. And if it's not connected to the ground, everyone agrees that it's not considered real estate. But the question is, if it's on the ground but not actually connected to the ground, is it considered real estate or not? And somehow this hive is owned by a person. So is that considered real estate or not? So if it's on the ground, even if it's not actually connected to the ground, it is considered like real estate, and if the borrower owned this, you can write a Pruzbul on it. And now, since we're saying it is considered ground, while it's on its place, it cannot become tameh, because anything connected to the ground cannot become tameh. And if you take honey out of there on Shabbos, you are liable. You violated one of the 39 malachos of Shabbos because you separated something from karka. It's almost like harvesting. I think it's a tolda of harvesting. It's not like cutting, taking an apple off a tree or picking a vegetable or cutting a grass, but because it's considered part of the ground, if you take it out of there, it's a tolda of harvesting. The Chachamim omer eina kekarka, but the Chachamim says it's not like real estate. It's not you're the owner of that. It's not considered as he owns real estate. You could write a Pruzbul. If it's in its place, it can become tameh. I wrote him in b'Shabbos pater, and if you take honey from there on Shabbos, it's not considered rimachal Shabbos. So if someone wants to return the loan, even though Shmitta canceled, so Bartanur says if it's during Shmitta, Shmitta hasn't canceled because the end of Shmitta happened. So it means someone after Shmitta says, you say, no, I'm canceling the loan. If he says, nevertheless, I want to pay you back, then he's allowed to accept it. Shnemer, the pasuk says, this is the word of Shmitta. So you have to say, I'm not, this is Shmitta, I'm not accepting it. But so once you said it and he still gives it to you, you're allowed to take it. If someone who killed accidentally and he had to go to an Ir Miklat, if the Ir Miklat wants to give him a position of honor, he has to say, well, I live here because I killed someone b'shogeg. So maybe you don't want to honor me. So if they say, we still want to honor you with this position, maybe it's dog catcher, I don't know, but then he could accept it. But Zed Devar HaRotzeach, a similar Xeris, this is the word of the Rotzeach, he has to tell them, I killed by accident, so maybe you don't want to do this.
Honor me, yeah.
Test. If you return the loan, even though you didn't have to, the Chachamim are happy with you. Literally, the spirit of the Chachamim is placed by him. So it's placed, pleased. Noach could also mean pleasant. If you borrowed from a convert whose children converted with him, you do not return to his sons. Meaning, when this guy already had kids and the whole family converted, so they're not halachically, they're all considered newborn, independent people when they were converted. So the kids aren't halachically considered the kids of the father. Biologically, they are, but not halachically. But if you returned it to the kids, the Chachamim were happy with them. All transferable non-real estate, any movable property, you acquire it by pulling it. So this really, the main halacha for this is in the middle of the first parak of Kedushin, where it talks about different things. Animals, you have to lead it, or you transfer it. Smaller things, you either transfer it over or you pick it up. So this is Mashicha. So when someone gives it to you and then you, but anyone who keeps his word, the Chachamim are very happy with him. So what does this mean? So this is talking about a case where you agreed to sell something and maybe you even paid. So payment, everyone thinks you paid for it, it's yours. Halachically, no, that's only true for real estate. But if I bought, I had a book, I sold you a book, you gave me the money, but I didn't give you the book yet, I can retract the sale because the halachically the sale didn't go through yet. So even though we agreed to buy it, you agreed to buy it, I agreed to sell it, but before you actually got it, before you received it, I can cancel the sale. But if I didn't, the Chachamim are upset at me. And in some cases, they put the basin, we don't do it anymore, but the basin puts a curse on you. It says someone who doesn't fulfill his word should be like the generation of the flood. So these last few phrases were just, it started with that the Chachamim are happy if you pay back the loan, even if you didn't have to. Then it gave us a couple other situations where you're obligated to pay back the loan, but if you did, or in the last case, you went through with the sale, even though you technically the sale wasn't completed yet, these are cases the Chachamim are happy with you. So I thought we get the halachas of Pruzbul today, but we are not going to get there. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, if they owed so the loan wasn't canceled yet. Now, whether halacha recognizes an obligation of payments in the middle, that I don't know. I mean, if you make an agreement, then they're supposed to pay. I mean, I guess they're supposed to pay. You can make an agreement and it's din of the malchusa. I don't see a problem with that. But no, even though the loan is eventually going to be canceled, but if they owed something now, whether it's considered a different loan, I don't know. But yeah, they could pay in the middle of the year. That's not, Shmitta hadn't canceled it yet. Okay, so we'll figure out how we're doing the halachos, but we'll learn other halachos starting next week, God willing. So I guess probably we'll talk about a little bit about Het Mechira and Ozer Beistin and some other practical stuff. Some of which were from the Mishna, some of which isn't found in the Mishna. So what do we want to say here? We want to say Solik Masech Shviis. We're done, but let's return to Masech Shviis. Gone but not forgotten. So the halachos about shtaros, some are in ksuvos in the second parak, and some are in Bava Basra. So just because it talks about writing a shtar, that's coincidental. But in Bava Basra, it talks a lot about how to write a shtar. Or in ksuvos, because the ksuva is a type of shtar, it talks about how to write a shtar. So it didn't go on that big of a tangent. Okay,